Hey, Basslightning here, and welcome to another bass workshop. And this one is focused on theory application. I'll just put the disclaimer out there. I'm not a music teacher. I don't have a music degree. You know what I'm saying? Not a know-it-all. And I just like to share what I do to get my skills and to improve them. So we'll just start out. I deleted yesterday's workshop just because it was kind of scattered. It wasn't focused enough, and interruptions, and it just didn't come out good, so I got rid of it. I'm just gonna do a redo and focus on a more organized delivery of information here. We'll go with that. So I have my notes out and lots of stuff to go over, but what I'm going to do is just one building block at a time. So what I did back in the day is I just focused on notation and the timing and where they're located on the stave. So I can take any example to use this. So like this one here is pretty good. And this one here has all of the old church modes and treble and bass clef that is transcribed out here. And it has the minor keys, which is really key. And the best way that I can explain this in my, old school rock brain to convey to all of you how I learned and got my theory knowledge over time is take the building blocks. So what we'll do is we'll just start with the first building block. All right. But first I'm going to start with some rocket fuel. All right. So we take where everything is located. So we're just going to take bass clef because this is a bass workshop. Treble clef, the notes are located in a different position on the stave, as I've explained before. So we'll just take bass clef, okay? Now what you always want to start with is where are the notes located on the stave. The way I always memorized it was the bottom line is G, first space is A, second line is obviously B, then C, then D, E, F, G, up to the octave, and so forth. So just bass clef, treble clef is different. I'm not going to get into that. Trying to explain both at the same time in that last workshop was just kind of a nightmare. So once, and when you start your sight reading, always start with slow readings, slow tempo, and start with whole notes. So now that's going to bring me to note timing. So note timing, whole notes are 4 beats, right? In a 4/4 timing signature, whole notes are 4 beats. So there should only be one whole note per measure on a stave of 4/4 timing, okay? Then the next up would be half notes are 2 notes per beat. So you should have 2 half notes in a 4/4 measure to equal 4 beats. 2 plus 2 is 4. And then quarter notes, 1 note per beat. So 4 beats should be 4 quarter notes in a 4/4 measure to complete the timing. The notes on a stave that are required in a 4/4 measure. There we go. All right, so then next up, you've got eighth notes. Eighth notes are 2 beats, 2 notes per beat. So in a measure of 4/4, I'm just using 4/4 because that's the most common. There obviously are a ton of different timings out there. Just remember, what that timing is. If it's 5/4, then there needs to be 5 beats per measure. If it's 6/8, it's the same as cut time. Or sorry, not cut time. That's 2/4. It's the same as 3/4. Very similar, 3 beats. Only in 6/8 there's 6, but it's still timed in 3s. If you can get what I'm saying there. Okay, so without getting too deep into that, next up is 16th notes. 4 notes per beat. So do the math. 4, 8, 12, 16. So there should be 16 notes in one measure in a 4/4 timing stave for one measure. One measure being from here to here. And so then, of course, from 16ths, then there's 32nds, and then there's 64th notes, which almost nobody uses. Then there's triplets, okay? There's another one that's a good one. I use those a lot. So triplets are 3 notes per one beat. So da 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 da. So da 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 da. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. That's one measure. So on the stave there will be triplets written 4 times in a 4/4 measure to to complete one measure on the stave. So I'm going to go as far as 16ths and triplets because you get into 32nd notes and 64th notes. I mean, that's really fast, and there's not a lot of music out there in popular music that has that fast. Maybe some of the soloing and stuff like that, but just do the math. So it's whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth notes, triplets, 16ths. Those are your most common notations in all of music. When you get into 32nd and 64th notes, that's very fast. But you can do the math. You just keep going. That's how many beats, how many notes per beat in a 4/4 measure. So you figure 32nd notes, that's a lot of notes per beat. And then 64ths, that's a lot of notes per beat. So you just do the math in succession. But I'm going to leave those out for today's lesson. I might bring those into like a more advanced workshop or something like that, where I can get into faster timing and notes and on the stave, that sort of thing. But remember, focused information delivery. That's what I'm one building block at a time here. So we'll just go as far as 16ths and triplets for today's lesson. Those are the most common notations made in just about all of music. I mean, how many songs do you hear with 32nd notes in it? I mean, that's or 64s. Drumming, probably more common, when there's like a quick, fill or a solo type of thing or something like that on the guitar. Not so much on the bass, bass has always been more of a supportive type of instrument. You're playing 64th notes on a bass. I mean, people aren't going to even be able to decipher it. I mean, yes, of course it exists. But, so moving on, those are your basics. So just to keep the building blocks organized and the information delivery of what I know and what I've learned over the 35 plus years I've been a professional musician. Bass clef only, remember, is, okay, so we've gone through where the notes are on the stave, right? Make sure you learn where the notes are. Bass clef. Know where the notes are. Know what that line and that space represent notes. All the way up the stave and beyond it, there's a contra octave that goes down below it too. And especially in bass music, you're going to see contra octaves used down below the stave. And you need to, count the notes and where it's located. And know those are the notes. And especially if you have like a 5-string bass or a 6-string bass where you would actually use those more often. but you can use the alternative note on the octave up as long as you're playing the right note in the right timing. You know, whether it's a eighth note, quarter note, 16th note, whatever, half note. Now remember, you get into dotted notes. Now when you get into dotted notes, like a dotted quarter, all you're doing is extending that note slightly beyond the timing of what the normal timing of that note would be. So if there's a dotted note, then that's what it represents. It's more of an accenting thing. What I've always done when I was my 4 years in a jazz band and my 1 year of theory brain knowledge here. That's what I've always gone by. So I'm not going to get into key signatures and natural notes and all that. Like, again, I'll do some more advanced training in another workshop. For right now, that's all you really need to know. Is for the start with the basics on sight reading for bass clef. So it's easier to start with whole notes when you're starting to read music. That's what I did. And again, it's not creative brain, it's math brain. So you're only playing what's on the sheet music. That was something I did with the other workshop that I wasn't happy with. Was I showed you an example of what to do and what not to do, and it's like, I didn't really like how that came out. Let's just focus on what you're supposed to do. It's just a lot easier in the delivering this information. There's a ton of stuff here, especially when I get into my handbook that I can't possibly cover in one session here. So okay, so let's see. I guess so now that I've covered sight reading basics, where the notes are on the stave, the timing of the notes in which they are written, and the measures. Remember, the timing signature tells you how many beats per measure are on that stave. Very important. So if it's 5/4, there's 5 beats per measure. If it's 7/4, there's 7 beats per measure. Now that's 7 beats before you move on to the next measure. So if you're writing something, or most of the time, if you're just following along, you're going to see it, and that's how you play it. But if you're actually writing music on the stave, creating your own piece or transcribing or whatever, you need to keep that in mind. Okay, it's not 4 beats per measure, it's 7 beats per measure. And that's just an example. It keeps going. There's 6/8. There's cut time, which is 2/4. That's only 2 beats per measure. Very fast. Not necessarily in tempo, but before you're on to the next measure. So keep those basics in mind, if that makes sense. That's the way I've always done it. I placed second in the nationals in Virginia from sight reading out of 10 high schools out of the entire country. So I would say I have some merit when it comes to sight reading. That was in a national competition years ago, But I always kept sight reading in my toolbox because though I'm not out searching for sight reading gigs, I use it as a learning tool to improve my own playing always. You should always do that too. All right, so I guess the next segment, since I touched on sight reading basics, we could at least touch on the circle of fifths. And it's that guy there. Now, I'm not going to break it all down, but I'll give you the basics. Okay, the order of sharps in the circle of fifths is F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Order of flats is B, E, A, D, G, C, F. So you're going one way or the other, clockwise, counterclockwise, on the circle of fifths, which form a circle, and then you just follow the notes. It's pretty straightforward. It's just that's what is it's related to a lot of standard notation music and what's in the music, and it connects a lot of different stuff out there. So it's good to know these. This is another this is another skill to have in your toolbox, is to understand the circle of fifths and how it relates to what you're playing. So yeah, just you can find it anywhere online, whatever. This is my home scratched note version, but it's the same thing. As long as you're learning on a uniform source, make sure you be careful, because you don't want to get too much into music teachers with their subjective methods. You want to learn your own way. And of course you want to learn from people who know more. That's how you do with anything. But all right, so that's a much better presentation delivery of that information. And I'm not jumping around too much. I'm just trying to stay focused, because again, I'm not a music teacher. Don't want to be. Don't care about it. But I like to share a lot of what I do to do what I do. My skill set, how I improve myself. All right, so let's jump over to drop tunings, something fun, and I use it quite often on the bass and the guitar. So we want to do, for drop B, is, I would say, the most complex drop tuning. Tune the whole guitar down a minor third from standard, which is 440 on your, standard 440 is your standard tuning. Middle C, it's the center of where everything is tuned to. And on your tuner, 440 would be, right in the middle. And then you can tune down a half step. Some singers do that. My old singer used to do that, and it used to drive me nuts, because I used to end up having to retune my bass when I would come back and do my own material, because I always tuned at 440 standard, but to each their own. So drop B, tune the whole guitar down a minor third from standard, then go an additional whole step down on the 6th string, or low E. So you got that? So B, G flat, B, E, A flat, D flat. So that is really, I would say, the most, drop B is the most complicated to remember. Not that it's that complicated, but out of there's drop D and there's drop C out of the other tunings. The most common I use is drop D. You tune the low E down one whole step to D. That's it, and it sounds really cool with heavier music, especially. Drop C, you tune the low E down to C. And C, G, C, F, A, D. So that's like kind of easy, like drop D, but most common one I use is drop D. So it's just easier, quicker. You don't have to mess around with your intonation or anything, All right. So we've covered sight reading basics and bass clef, timing signatures, the basics on the circle of fifths, drop tuning, and those are things that are really important as building blocks into more advanced theory, such as inversions, chord restacking. Also, your scale degrees. Make sure you're memorizing your scale degrees, which is intervallic. Know your intervals. So I'll just play an example of, I'll go through some intervallic stuff with you. So in scale degrees, it would be tonic is your root key, Then there's supertonic, mediant, submediant, dominant. You go up to your octave as you're walking up to your octave. So, and instead of getting into scale degrees, I don't want to get too much into that. I'll save that for the more advanced workshop. But I'll just name it in intervals, which is the most common way to memorize your spacing between notes on the neck. So I'll just pick the key of G. So if I'm going to play a fifth, most commonly used in bar chords all over the world in the universe. So that's a fifth. So it's G and D. So all you have to do is count the notes in terms of how far apart they are from each other, and that's your interval. Now, in scale degrees, there are names for those that you need to memorize. And again, we'll get into that on another workshop. I'll get my handbook out and make sure I'm conveying the proper scale degrees with the intervallic relationships within them, and then that way, everything will be good. But for this workshop, let's just stick to the intervals. So there's a second, so it'd be A. Remember, G and A, they're only 2 notes apart, so that's a second. So and then B is a third, major third. Now, if you want to go, that would be your minor third, major third. I use them both all the time, so. Or in major form. And you can combine minor and major intervals too, like what I just did there. I just did a minor third and a major third, coming back to the tonic, which is G. So I'm just using quick examples without getting knee deep in something that it's going to take me forever to explain my way out of. So, so it's just one example. So your fourth. So okay, so we've done major second or minor two, whichever mode you're in. So the second, major third, minor third. So minor's first, then major third. Fourth would be C, commonly used in country music. So country bass lines, they use fourths all the time. That's a fourth. So in the key of G. Now remember, always keep in mind what key you're in, what the tonic is of whatever section you are playing. I'm assuming you already know how to play, so like I said, I'm not going to get into striking position, finger position in the center of the fret to be in pitch and all that kind of stuff. I'm assuming you already can play something. So this is not really 101. It's more like 102, So here's your fourth. So here's your second. Here's your minor third, major third, fourth. And here's your, remember, what would I say that was? Diminished fifth. And your perfect fifth. Augmented, which is very dissonant. So there's your fifth. And you just keep walking up to the octave, which is 8. When you get past the 7th, whether it's dominant 7th or whatever, then you're up to the octave. So you just keep walking that way up to the octave. So everything's based on the major scale. When it comes to intervals, unless you're in a minor key, then of course then you need to study those changes and what notes change in there. But for basic intervallic relationships, absolutely, that's what you need to go by, is you're really just following a major or minor scale. Pentatonic's kind of major and minor free. Of course, I use that a lot. That's the most commonly used scale in all of music, especially rock music and pop. I'm not going to get into variations or anything creative because that's what I do most of the time. There's a ton of variations you can do with the pentatonic scale, as I've shown in other workshops. You can add in a blues scale. There's another thing to learn. You can add in chromatic. You can add in your triads. So that's what we're going to touch on next after the intervals. So from G, you've got your major second, minor third, major third, fourth, diminished fifth, perfect fifth, sixth, and there's a really popular one too. Dominant seventh. And remember, just count the notes. How many notes it is from the tonic. So you just count up the neck or down, whichever way you're going. Whether it's, and I don't want to get into inversions and all that stuff again. I'll save that for the advanced. So it always starts with minor, then goes to major on the inclining intervals as you're going up and down the neck, if you're going up the neck. So what is that? G and D sharp. So just count the notes. See that? So, and it also in position on the fretboard. So it's not just counting the notes, it's knowing which way you're heading, you know, whether you're going sharp or you're going flat on the neck, and there's that too. So see that? You complete the octave, and then you're on the same note an octave higher. So, or second position. Now there's G. That's the 11th fret for those of you who are tablature heads. See, all the variations that you do are all intervals. You know, everything is an interval that's between each other. It's just the amount of notes that's between the other note. So minor sixth, major sixth, dominant seventh. So it's minor, major, next note. In this case, we're on the octave, so it's the same note that you started with on the next position, on the second position. So see how that works? So now I'm going to complete the entire spectrum, starting from the root or tonic. I don't know how well you can see this. I'm trying to keep everything to where you can see me and not just see this part of my bass. So I'm in kind of tight here. So we'll do the whole spectrum and then we'll move on. So remember, count the notes. So tonic is 1, major and minor second is 2. Depends on what mode you're in, but 2. And then minor third, major third is 3. It's still 3, whether it's minor third or major third. And you got your fourth, and then you've got, you could call it an it's not really an augmented fourth because you're going, it doesn't make sense because you're going up in succession. And plus, with your root note, it's actually a flat 5. Then you're completing the perfect fifth. Then you're going up to minor 6th, major 6th, minor 7, major 7th, and octave. So I'm going to complete that curriculum right from G. That just happens to be the key. I think you can do it in A, B, C, or whatever. So let's just do it. I'm just going to go through the whole spectrum slowly. And those are all the intervals contained in that key. Now you can do it anywhere in any key. You can do it in C, you can do it in D. Just remember, it's the same thing. And I just did it in D there. You can do the whole interval spectrum in any key because those notes are there. Now that's not a scale, those are just the intervallic relationships between notes within whatever key that you're in. That's all that is. So there you go. So remember, it's always minor then major on your, well, whether you're inclining or declining, it doesn't matter. It's always, so minor 6th, major 6th, minor 7th, major 7th, or dominant 7th, which is, and then octave. And everything that you can play contained within the framework of that key are all intervallic relationships. So that's how you memorize intervals. That's how I did a long time ago. It's how I've always done it. There really isn't any other version of that. I mean, it's objective. It's the information is not something that you can apply or turn around. It's like math. Math is what it is. Intervals are intervals. That's it. There is no other version of it, or you know what I mean? So, all right. So now just going to do a recap just to keep myself organized with information that I'm sharing on how I build my skills and knowledge here at the studio, out on stage, or whatever it is I'm doing musically on the bass guitar or the guitar. So we covered sight reading basics, circle of fifths, intervals, which are related to scale degrees. And now we're going to move on to the next segment, which will be triads. So major and minor triads are used to connect the neck up. I use it in guitar all the time, bass, so since we're favoring the key of G today, I'll just, for example purposes, I'll just stay in G. So now, you've heard that bass line in probably 1,000 songs, especially like rockabilly, classic rock, or whatever. Used everywhere, Now, let's break that down. Now, again, going back to intervals, but also triads. That's a major triad. So, G, B, D. So, now, you can do that anywhere in the neck. So watch, and there's your major triads. Now you see how that connects the neck really good. Now we can try minor triads, which are used all the time. I use them all the time. So minor triad. What was that song from Golden Earring? I think it's in B though, in B major. Well, that's a minor triad. So G, B flat, C. That would be your minor triad in the key of G. So. So if I want to connect the neck up just like the major triads. And you can also mix it in with major. But remember, we're not using creative brain here. Math brain, so. And then you can do it in A. See, back to the octave. You see how that connects up the neck? But we're staying in the key of G for example purposes. So. Okay, so we've covered major and minor triads. Now I just took one key to connect up the neck, but you can do that in any key. You can do it in A flat, you can do it in B, you can do it in D, you can do it in E, you can do it in F, F sharp. So in succession, let's say we'll start in E. So that's another thing, is know where the notes are located on the neck. You know, so E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. Now those same notes going backwards are, that's what they call the enharmonic equivalents. So E, E flat, etc. And then you just go backwards. For sake of time, I'm not going to go through the whole, but yeah, you just do it backwards. So instead of sharps, they become flats. They're the same note, but really they're not, because you're going in an opposite direction. On the stave, it's written as sharps or flats. That's how you go. You're going up or you're going down on the neck. That's what signifies which note it is in the enharmonic equivalent. It's an equivalent. Think of what that word means. Equivalent. It's an equivalent is the same thing, but it's written differently. You know, equivalent. So, what the equivalent to Coca-Cola is Diet Coke. It's the same thing, but it's written a little different. You know, I know, weird analogy. I get into those. So, all right. So now that we've covered major and minor triads, intervals, so let's do a recap. All right. So, sight reading basics. Know where all the notes are on the stave. Know what the notes in bass clef. Know what the note timings are, whether it's half note or whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note. Triplets, 32nd notes, 64th notes. The circle of fifths and how that relates to what you're playing. There's a succession there, sharps and flats. Know what those notes are and then just follow them. Once you got to learn all the notes here and where they are before you can do any of that. So what I just showed you there is the very important first step. You know your neck, know where all the notes are. If I'm going to pick, A on the 12th fret, I know it's right there. I don't even think about it. My hand just goes there because I've been doing this for like 35 plus years, and I know where all the notes There's what I call third position, or the highest. You can do a lot of different scales and riffs from the 12th fret, which gives a whole different effect to the sound of a piece, that's kind of cool there. And if you're reading it on the stave, it's going to be, that's where it's where you get that contra octave. If it's down lower or it's up higher, like I say again, if you only have a 4-string, you have to do the alternative. There's no 5th or 6th string. There's no high C and there's no low B, you know what I mean? So you have to just play the notes that you have on there. So that's what you have to do. I mean, when are you going to play it in the air? Oh, here's the contra octave. Oh, I can't hear any sound, you know. So the way I've always done it, and I just play the notes that are written on the notes that I have available, because that's the physical space you have to do it in. So kind of a physics thing. Can't play on an invisible fretboard, or part of a fretboard. So went over drop tunings. So and again, you can look stuff up online for reference. I keep physical notated documentation because I'm old school. Obviously, there are 1,000 workshops out there from educators and, Berklee College of Music, and then you can get in with your know-it-alls and learn stuff from them. That's how I take know-it-alls. Okay, what can I learn from this guy? So that's about it for this workshop. Thank you for joining me. I just wanted to go over some basics, and that's as far as I'm going to go with today's workshop, and we will catch you all on the next one. Lots more music to come. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you all have a great day. Remember, learn the neck.